In 2016, a massive Chinese fantasy adventure hit the screen with a budget that shocked the industry and visual effects that tried to compete with Hollywood-level storytelling. The Monkey King 2 is not just another fantasy film. It is a reimagining of one of the most legendary characters in Eastern mythology, Sun Wukong, also known as the Monkey King. With a production scale that included huge battle sequences, mystical realms, and heavy CGI environments, this film pushes the boundaries of traditional Chinese cinema. But behind all the visual spectacle lies a deeper journey, one of redemption, control, belief, and inner struggle that defines every character's path. Before we dive into this epic story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment your favorite fantasy movie. Your support keeps this journey going. The story begins in a world where monks and demons exist side by side, constantly clashing in a battle between enlightenment and destruction. At the center of this journey is Monk Tang, a peaceful and spiritually driven monk whose mission is to travel west and retrieve sacred scriptures that can bring balance and wisdom to the world. However, this journey is far from simple. The world is filled with powerful demons who see Monk Tang not as a holy traveler, but as an opportunity. Alongside him is his most powerful yet unpredictable disciple, Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, a being of immense strength who once rebelled against heaven itself. His past is dark, filled with destruction, arrogance, and punishment, and now he is forced to walk a path of discipline under the guidance of Monk Tang. But even though he is bound by rules and a magical seal that controls his power, his inner rage and pride are never fully gone. As the journey progresses, the group faces constant danger from hidden forces watching them closely. Among these forces is one of the most terrifying and intelligent enemies they will ever face, the White Bone Demon. Unlike ordinary monsters who rely on brute strength, she uses deception, illusion, and psychological manipulation to break her enemies from within. She does not simply attack the body, she attacks the mind, creating situations where truth and illusion become impossible to distinguish. Her goal is not just to kill Monk Tang, but to destroy the unity of the group by turning them against each other. This is where the real conflict begins. Not just battles with weapons, but battles of trust, belief, and perception. The Monkey King, despite his incredible strength, becomes the center of this conflict. His past reputation as a destroyer makes him an easy target for suspicion. Every illusion created by the White-Bone Demon is designed to make him look like the threat. Villagers, allies, and even Monk Tang begin to question his intentions. This slowly builds tension within the group as trust starts to weaken. Sun Wukong, who once ruled the skies with arrogance, now finds himself struggling not with enemies outside, but with the doubt growing inside his own team. This emotional pressure becomes more dangerous than any physical attack. The film cleverly shows that power alone is not enough to survive a journey like this. Control, patience, and trust are far more important. As the story deepens, the White-Bone Demon escalates her strategy. She transforms herself into different innocent forms, manipulating situations where the Monkey King appears guilty of violence against innocent people. Each illusion is carefully designed to break Monk Tang's faith in him. And this is where the emotional core of the movie shines. Monk Tang represents compassion and forgiveness, while Sun Wukong represents strength and chaos trying to be controlled. The tension between these two characters becomes the emotional backbone of the film. The audience is forced to ask a difficult question: can someone with a violent past ever truly be trusted, even if they are trying to change? Or is redemption just an illusion itself? The visuals during this part of the movie are intense, filled with dark forests, shifting landscapes, and surreal transformations that blur the line between reality and deception. Every encounter feels unpredictable, and every character action carries weight. The Monkey King's frustration grows as he realizes that no matter what he does, the world will always see him as a monster. This inner conflict begins to challenge his identity more than any physical battle ever could. And while Monk Tang continues to seek peace, even he starts to struggle with doubt, unsure whether his disciple is truly loyal or slowly returning to his destructive nature. This foundation sets up a much deeper emotional and philosophical journey for what comes next. The first part of the story is not just about introducing characters or setting up a mission. It is about breaking them emotionally before the real trials begin. Every illusion, every misunderstanding, and every moment of doubt is carefully placed to test the strength of their bond. And as the journey continues, the line between enemy and ally becomes even more blurred, forcing every character to confront not just demons outside, but the demons within themselves. Continuing the intense fantasy journey of The Monkey King 2, the second part dives deeper into psychological warfare, emotional breakdown, and the true test of trust between Monk Tang and Sun Wukong. As the group continues their sacred journey toward the west, the world around them becomes more hostile, not just physically, but mentally. The White-Bone Demon has now fully revealed her strategy. She will not fight them directly in a simple battle, but instead destroy them slowly by manipulating perception, turning allies into suspects and truth into confusion. This is where the story shifts from a physical adventure into a psychological battlefield where no one can trust what they see. The journey takes the group into a darker and more isolated region, where villages appear abandoned and silence feels unnatural. Every step forward feels like walking deeper into a trap. Monk Tang, still committed to his belief in compassion, tries to see goodness in every situation, but even his faith starts to feel tested. The Monkey King, however, becomes more alert and aggressive. His instincts tell him that something unnatural is controlling the environment around them. But the problem is that every time he tries to act, it seems to confirm the suspicion that he is the danger himself. This creates a painful contradiction. Protecting the group makes him look guilty, and staying passive makes him feel useless. The White-Bone Demon begins her next phase of manipulation. She disguises herself as innocent villagers, victims, and even people in distress, all carefully designed to trigger emotional responses. Each encounter is staged to make Sun Wukong appear violent or reckless. The group starts witnessing incidents where destruction follows the Monkey King's actions, but what they do not realize is that these are illusions crafted to frame him. The demon understands something very important. Physical strength means nothing if trust is destroyed. Slowly, Monk Tang begins to hesitate. His once unshakable faith in his disciple begins to weaken as the evidence around him appears undeniable. This emotional fracture becomes the heart of the story. Sun Wukong, who once stood above heaven and earth with pride, now finds himself in a position where his own identity is questioned. He is not just fighting enemies anymore, he is fighting perception. The film highlights this internal conflict beautifully. Instead of showing him as a perfect hero, it presents him as a broken warrior trying to prove that change is possible. But no matter what he does, the world refuses to see him beyond his past. This is where his character becomes deeply human, despite being a mythical being. At the same time, monk Tang struggles with his own dilemma. His role as a spiritual guide demands compassion, forgiveness, and patience, but reality keeps challenging those beliefs. When faced with constant illusions that suggest Sun Wukong is harming innocent people, he is forced to question whether holding on to faith is truly wisdom or dangerous ignorance. This internal conflict makes him one of the most emotionally complex characters in the story. He is not fighting demons outside, he is fighting doubt within himself. As tension rises, the white-bone demon escalates her attacks further by creating situations where the Monkey King is forced into impossible choices. Either he acts and risks appearing guilty, or he hesitates and allows danger to unfold. This psychological trap is designed to isolate him completely from the group. The more he tries to defend himself, the more the situation turns against him. It becomes a cycle of misunderstanding that feels impossible to escape. Even the audience begins to question what is real and what is illusion, which is exactly what the demon intends. The film's visual storytelling becomes more intense during this phase. Environments shift unpredictably, skies darken suddenly, and characters appear and disappear without warning. The boundaries between reality and illusion are completely blurred. The Monkey King's frustration reaches its peak as he realizes that fighting physical enemies is far easier than fighting lies that people believe. His strength, once his greatest weapon, now feels meaningless in a world where truth itself is unstable. One of the most powerful emotional moments in this part comes when Sun Wukong is directly confronted by Monk Tang. The trust between them reaches its lowest point. Monk Tang, torn between belief and evidence, questions whether he made a mistake by choosing the Monkey King as his disciple. This moment is not about anger, it is about heartbreak. Sun Wukong, for the first time, cannot respond with confidence. Instead, he is forced to face the painful possibility that no matter how much he changes, his past will always define him in the eyes of others. The white-bone demon watches this destruction of trust with satisfaction, as her true goal is not killing them but separating them emotionally, because once unity is broken, survival becomes impossible. The group begins to fall apart from within, and this marks the turning point of the story. The journey that once symbolized enlightenment is now becoming a test of endurance against manipulation and doubt. By the end of this section, everything is unstable. Trust is broken, truth is unclear, and even the strongest bond between master and disciple is hanging by a thread. Sun Wukong stands alone emotionally, questioning whether redemption is even possible in a world that refuses to forgive. Monk Tang, on the other hand, is trapped between his spiritual ideals and the harsh reality unfolding before him. This sets the stage for an even more intense continuation, where the final truth behind the white-bone demon's illusions will begin to surface, forcing every character to confront what is real and what is not. The conflict inside the Monkey King, too, now enters its most dangerous stage, where truth and illusion no longer have a clear boundary. After the emotional collapse between Monk Tang and Sun Wukong, the journey does not slow down. It becomes even more unstable. The white bone demon has successfully planted doubt inside the group, but her real intention is still not fully revealed. She does not want a quick victory. She wants complete psychological destruction, where even victory feels like defeat. The group continues moving forward, but now every step feels heavier, as if the path itself is rejecting them. Sun Wukong is now in a deeply isolated state. Even though he is physically still traveling with Monk Tang and the others, emotionally he is separated. The trust that once held the group together has fractured, and that fracture is slowly widening. He begins to question everything, not just the illusions created around him, but also his own identity. His past as a destroyer of heavens returns to his thoughts constantly. The more he tries to act with control, the more he feels trapped by the image others have of him. It becomes a cruel cycle. If he uses his strength, he is feared. If he holds back, he is seen as weak or suspicious. This internal contradiction pushes him into silence, which only makes him appear more dangerous in the eyes of others. Meanwhile, Monk Tang continues his journey in emotional conflict. His spiritual beliefs are being tested at the highest level. Every illusion created by the white-bone demon is carefully designed to challenge his compassion. He witnesses scenes where Sun Wukong appears to harm innocent lives, and even though part of him still wants to believe in his disciple, doubt grows stronger each time. The film shows his struggle not as weakness but as a human response to overwhelming manipulation. He is a man who has dedicated his life to enlightenment, but now he is forced to question whether enlightenment can survive in a world built on deception. His faith is no longer absolute. It is cracking under pressure. The white-bone demon now shifts her strategy again. Instead of only targeting Sun Wukong, she begins to manipulate Monk Tang directly. She creates illusions that make it appear as if Sun Wukong is planning betrayal, secretly turning against the group. At the same time, she presents situations where trusting him seems like a direct risk to Monk Tang's life. This creates a psychological trap where every decision feels wrong. If Monk Tang trusts Sun Wukong, he risks falling into danger. If he rejects him, he loses his strongest protector and betrays his own teachings. The demon is no longer just attacking the group, she is forcing them to destroy themselves through decision-making. Sun Wukong begins to realize something important during this phase. He understands that fighting the illusions directly is useless because they are designed to feed on reaction. The more he tries to prove his innocence, the deeper the misunderstanding becomes. This realization marks a subtle shift in his character. Instead of reacting with anger or frustration, he starts observing more carefully. He begins to see patterns in the illusions, small inconsistencies that reveal there is an intelligent force controlling everything. This is the first time he stops focusing on proving himself and instead focuses on understanding the enemy. It is a quiet but powerful transformation in his mindset. The tension reaches a breaking point when the group encounters another major illusion designed to fully break their unity. Monk Tang is shown a scenario where Sun Wukong appears to abandon them during a critical moment, leaving them vulnerable to attack. The emotional weight of this illusion is heavier than before because it directly attacks trust at its core. Monk Tang's belief finally collapses in that moment. He feels betrayed, not because of reality, but because of what he has been made to believe. This moment is heartbreaking because it shows how powerful deception can become when it replaces truth entirely. Sun Wukong, unaware of the illusion being witnessed, arrives too late to stop the emotional damage. When he sees Monk Tang's reaction, he immediately understands what has happened. But this time he does not argue or defend himself. Instead, something changes inside him. He realizes that words and actions are no longer enough. The only way to break this cycle is to confront the source of the illusion itself. This marks the beginning of his shift from being a reactive warrior to a focused hunter of truth. His strength is no longer just physical, it becomes mental clarity. The white bone demon, however, is not finished. She believes she has already won because the group is now emotionally divided, but what she underestimates is that Sun Wukong's transformation is far from complete. Even though he is hurt and isolated, his awareness is growing sharper. He starts tracing the patterns behind each illusion, noticing how they are connected to emotional triggers rather than physical reality. This gives him the first real advantage in the entire journey, not power, but understanding. By the end of this part, the journey has reached a critical point of collapse. The group that once traveled together with a shared mission is now divided by doubt, fear, and misunderstanding. Monk Tang stands torn between belief and evidence, unsure of what is real anymore. Sun Wukong stands alone in clarity, realizing that the enemy they are facing is not just a demon, but a master of psychological warfare. And somewhere in the shadows, the white bone demon continues to watch, confident that she has already broken them beyond repair. But beneath that confidence, a new shift is beginning, one that suggests the real battle has not yet started, and the Monkey King is slowly preparing to fight not just for survival, but for truth itself. The story of the Monkey King too now moves into a phase where everything becomes more intense, more emotional, and far more dangerous than before. After the deep trust breakdown between Monk Tang and Sun Wukong, the journey feels almost broken. The group is still physically together, but mentally and emotionally they are no longer united. The white bone demon has successfully achieved what she wanted in the previous stages. She has planted doubt so deep that even truth no longer feels reliable. Now, her next move is to tighten that confusion and push everyone toward a final collapse. Sun Wukong begins this stage in silence. He is no longer reacting the same way he used to. Earlier he would fight immediately when challenged or insulted, but now he is more controlled, observing everything carefully. This change is not weakness, it is adaptation. He has realized that this enemy does not fight with strength, but with manipulation. So instead of rushing into emotional reactions, he starts analyzing the structure behind every illusion. He notices that each fake scenario is connected to emotional pressure points: fear, guilt, and doubt. This awareness slowly turns into his greatest weapon. Monk Tang, however, is still emotionally unstable. His faith, which once guided every decision, is now fractured. He continues the journey because he believes it is his duty, but internally he is struggling between compassion and caution. Every time he looks at Sun Wukong, he remembers the illusions that showed him destruction and betrayal. Even though part of him still wants to trust his disciple, the fear of being wrong again keeps him distant. This emotional gap becomes a silent wall between them, They are walking the same path, but no longer in the same direction emotionally. The white-bone demon takes advantage of this distance. She begins a more aggressive phase of manipulation, creating illusions that are not just about Sun Wukong, but about Monk Tang's own leadership. She plans scenarios where his decisions seem to directly lead the group into danger. In these illusions, every choice he makes appears to cause suffering. This is a psychological attack designed to destroy his confidence as a spiritual guide. If Monk Tang begins to doubt his own judgment, then the entire group will collapse from within without any physical battle needed. Sun Wukong starts noticing something deeper during these events. He realizes that the illusions are becoming more complex, almost as if the enemy is studying their reactions. This confirms his suspicion that the white-bone demon is not just powerful but highly intelligent and strategic. Instead of random attacks, every illusion is calculated to create emotional breakdowns. This realization pushes him to think differently. He understands that defeating this enemy requires breaking the illusion system itself, not just surviving it. At one point in the journey, the group enters a region where reality becomes extremely unstable. The environment itself seems to shift constantly. Paths disappear, skies change color, and voices echo without source. This place is designed to disorient them completely. Mongtang becomes even more confused here as he cannot distinguish whether what he is seeing is real or another illusion. His spiritual grounding is being tested like never before. Sun Wukong, on the other hand, starts relying less on sight and more on instinct. He begins to feel patterns instead of seeing them, which becomes crucial in navigating this environment. The emotional tension between the two reaches another peak when Monk Tang openly questions Sun Wukong again. This time it is not just doubt, it is exhaustion. He feels mentally drained from constantly trying to understand what is real. Sun Wukong, instead of reacting emotionally, responds with calm restraint. He does not try to defend himself aggressively anymore. Instead, he simply states that truth will reveal itself eventually. This moment is important because it shows his transformation. He is no longer the impulsive warrior he once was. He is becoming someone who understands that patience is part of survival. Meanwhile, the white-bone demon begins preparing a final, more dangerous illusion sequence. She realizes that breaking trust alone is not enough anymore. The group is still moving forward despite emotional damage. So she escalates her plan by creating scenarios that directly target survival instincts. Illusions now involve life or death situations where decisions must be made instantly. In these moments, hesitation means death. This forces Monk Tang into extreme pressure situations where his spiritual calm is constantly disrupted. Sun Wukong also faces his own challenges here. The illusions begin to specifically target his past, showing him as a destroyer beyond redemption. These visions are designed to trigger his deepest insecurity, that no matter how much he changes, he will always be a monster in everyone's eyes. For a moment even he feels the weight of that identity again, but this time something is different. Instead of falling into rage or despair, he uses that pain as clarity. He begins to understand that the enemy is not trying to defeat his body, they are trying to control perception itself. By the end of this part, the situation becomes extremely unstable. The group is physically exhausted, emotionally fractured, and mentally overwhelmed. Monk Tang is losing his confidence as a leader. Sun Wukong is becoming emotionally detached but strategically aware, and the white-bone demon is closing in on what she believes is her final victory. However, beneath all this chaos, a shift is forming. Sun Wukong is no longer just reacting to illusions. He is starting to see through them, and this growing awareness sets the stage for a confrontation where illusion and reality will finally collide, forcing the truth behind everything to surface. As the journey continues in The Monkey King 2, the situation becomes even more unstable and the pressure on every character reaches a dangerous level. The White Bone Demon's psychological trap has already damaged the trust between Monk Tang and Sun Wukong, but now her focus shifts toward finishing what she started: complete emotional and mental collapse of the group. This part of the story is not about new enemies appearing, it is about existing bonds breaking under continuous pressure where even small doubts turn into irreversible cracks. Sun Wukong is now fully aware that the battlefield is no longer physical. He has stopped reacting impulsively and instead focuses on observing the structure of the illusions. He realizes that every false scenario follows a pattern. Each one is designed to trigger a specific emotional weakness. Fear, guilt, and mistrust are being used like weapons. This understanding changes his approach completely. Instead of proving himself or defending his actions, he starts collecting information silently, trying to locate the source behind the illusions. His transformation from a reactive warrior into a strategic thinker becomes more visible in this stage. Monk Tang, however, is reaching his breaking point. The constant manipulation has made him emotionally exhausted. His faith in compassion and forgiveness is still present, but it is no longer stable. Every illusion he witnesses feels more real than the last one. The White Bone Demon continues to target his leadership by creating situations where his decisions appear to cause harm. This makes him question not only Sun Wukong, but also himself. He begins to wonder whether his spiritual path is strong enough to survive a world filled with deception. This internal struggle is what makes his character deeply human. He is not fighting monsters outside, but uncertainty inside his own belief system. The White Bone Demon escalates her strategy further by isolating members of the group emotionally. She creates illusions where each disciple appears to act independently, suggesting betrayal from within the group. This is designed to break the last remaining connection between them. If trust inside the group disappears completely, then survival becomes impossible. The demon does not need to defeat them in combat. She only needs to make them turn against each other. This phase of manipulation is the most dangerous so far because it targets unity itself. Sun Wukong begins to notice something crucial during this stage. The illusions are becoming more refined, but they are also leaving behind small inconsistencies. He starts paying attention to timing, repetition, and environmental details that do not align perfectly. These small cracks in the illusion system give him hope that the enemy, despite being powerful, is not flawless. This becomes his first real opportunity to fight back mentally. Instead of being trapped inside the illusion cycle, he starts identifying moments where reality briefly overlaps with deception. At one point in the journey, the group faces an illusion that pushes Monk Tang to the edge of collapse. He is shown a scenario where his teachings are responsible for destruction, and people he tried to save are suffering because of his choices. This illusion is particularly powerful because it attacks his identity as a spiritual guide. For a moment, he truly believes that his path may be wrong. This is the most vulnerable point for his character, where faith and doubt collide directly. Sun Wukong observes this moment carefully, realizing that the enemy is intentionally trying to destroy Monk Tang's confidence, so the entire group loses direction. Sun Wukong makes a quiet decision here, not to fight emotionally, but to protect stability. Instead of reacting to the illusion directly, he focuses on keeping Monk Tang grounded. He does not argue or force belief. Instead, he tries to maintain calm presence, allowing Monk Tang space to process what is real and what is not. This subtle shift shows that Sun Wukong is no longer just a fighter. He is becoming a stabilizing force for the group, even while being personally targeted by suspicion. The white bone demon, however, becomes more aggressive as she senses resistance. Her illusions now begin to overlap, making it harder to distinguish one scenario from another. Reality feels fragmented. The group experiences moments where time and space feel distorted, and even simple movements become confusing. This is intentional. She is trying to completely disorient them so they lose all ability to make rational decisions. Her strategy is no longer just psychological manipulation, it is total sensory control. Despite this chaos, Sun Wukong begins to connect the dots. He starts realizing that the illusions are not random, they are centered around emotional hotspots, especially Monk Tang's doubts. This leads him to a critical insight. If the illusions are reacting to emotion, then controlling emotional response might weaken their effect. This becomes the foundation of his new strategy. Instead of fighting illusions directly, he begins to minimize emotional reaction, creating less fuel for the enemy to manipulate. Monk Tang also slowly begins to recover moments of clarity. Even though doubt still lingers, he starts noticing inconsistencies in the visions he is shown. Small details do not align, and this creates hesitation in fully believing what he sees. This hesitation is important because it reopens the possibility of trust. The emotional distance between him and Sun Wukong does not disappear, but it becomes less absolute. There is a slight shift where uncertainty about truth replaces complete belief in deception. By the end of this part, the situation remains tense but slightly changed in tone. The white bone demon still holds control over the battlefield of illusion, but cracks are beginning to form in her system. Sun Wukong is no longer fully trapped. He is starting to understand the structure of the enemy's power. Monk Tang is no longer completely convinced by deception, he is beginning to question the illusions themselves, and the group, though fractured, is not fully destroyed. This creates a turning point where the battle is no longer just about survival, but about breaking free from control itself. The Monkey King too, the tension reaches a new level where survival, truth, and illusion collide more violently than ever before. The white bone demon has already succeeded in shaking the foundation of trust between Monk Tang and Sun Wukong, but now her goal is to completely trap them inside a cycle of confusion where escape feels impossible. The journey no longer feels like a spiritual mission. It feels like a mental prison slowly closing in from all sides. Sun Wukong begins this stage with a sharper awareness than before. He is no longer reacting emotionally to every situation. Instead, he is analyzing patterns in how illusions are created. He notices that every false scenario is built around timing and emotional pressure. When Monk Tang is weakest emotionally, the illusions become more aggressive. When the group is tired or confused, the deception becomes more detailed and realistic. This leads Sun Wukong to understand that the enemy is not just powerful but highly adaptive. The white bone demon is studying them in real time, adjusting her strategy based on their reactions. Monk Tang, on the other hand, is struggling with internal exhaustion. His spiritual path demands calmness and compassion, but the continuous psychological attacks are eroding his mental stability. He starts questioning whether his presence is actually helping or harming the group. Every illusion that shows destruction linked to his decisions makes him feel responsible for the suffering around him. This guilt slowly becomes a burden heavier than any physical threat. Even though he tries to remain composed, the pressure is slowly breaking his emotional balance. The white bone demon now intensifies her manipulation by targeting both characters simultaneously but in different ways. For Sun Wukong, she creates illusions that isolate him completely, making it appear as though every decision he takes leads to destruction. For Monk Tang, she creates visions where Sun Wukong appears not just dangerous but deliberately harmful. This dual-layered manipulation is designed to ensure that neither trust nor logic can survive. If both leader and protector doubt each other, the group will naturally fall apart without any need for direct combat. Sun Wukong begins to respond differently in this stage. Instead of trying to escape or fight every illusion, he starts focusing on identifying the source energy behind them. He understands that these illusions are not random hallucinations, but structured projections tied to emotional triggers. This realization changes his approach from reaction to investigation. He begins moving through illusions with minimal resistance, observing rather than engaging. This detachment makes him less vulnerable to emotional manipulation, but it also makes him appear even more distant to Monk Tang. Monk Tang notices this change and misinterprets it as emotional withdrawal or hidden intent. This misunderstanding deepens the gap between them. The emotional distance that was already formed earlier now becomes more pronounced. They are still physically together, but mentally they are no longer aligned. The white bone demon continues to exploit this distance, carefully increasing the complexity of illusions whenever communication between them weakens. At one critical point, the group enters a region where reality itself seems unstable. The environment shifts unpredictably, and familiar landmarks disappear or reappear without explanation. This disorientation is intentional, designed to remove any sense of direction or certainty. Monk Tang becomes visibly overwhelmed here, struggling to maintain focus. Sun Wukong, however, begins to rely more on instinct than sight. He starts recognizing subtle signs that indicate illusion layers, small inconsistencies in sound, movement, and repetition that help him distinguish reality from manipulation. The emotional tension reaches another peak when Monk Tang confronts Sun Wukong again, this time with deeper frustration. He questions whether trusting him was a mistake from the beginning. This is not anger, it is emotional exhaustion turning into doubt. Sun Wukong, instead of defending himself aggressively, remains calm. He understands that arguing within an illusion-based environment will only strengthen the enemy's control. His silence, however, is misunderstood again, increasing Monk Tang's suspicion. Meanwhile, the white bone demon begins preparing a more advanced illusion strategy. Instead of targeting only emotions, she starts blending physical danger with psychological manipulation. This creates situations where survival decisions must be made instantly, leaving no time for reflection. These moments force the characters into instinctive reactions, which the demon then uses to reinforce false narratives. Every action becomes a potential tool for further manipulation. Sun Wukong starts noticing something important here. These illusions are becoming less perfect over time. The more complex they become, the more unstable they appear at the edges. This gives him a critical insight. The system controlling the illusions has limits. It can simulate reality, but it cannot perfectly replicate it under pressure. This becomes a turning point in his understanding. Instead of trying to escape illusions, he begins thinking about disrupting their structure from within. Monk Tang also experiences brief moments of clarity during this stage. In between illusions, he starts noticing emotional inconsistencies in what he sees. Sometimes the fear feels exaggerated, sometimes the timing feels unnatural. These small doubts prevent him from fully surrendering to deception. While he is still confused, complete belief in illusions is no longer possible. This marks the beginning of mental resistance against manipulation. By the end of this part, the situation is still dangerous but slightly shifting. The white bone demon continues to maintain control, but cracks in her illusion system are becoming more visible. Sun Wukong is no longer just surviving, he is actively analyzing the structure of deception. Monk Tang is no longer fully convinced by illusion, he is beginning to question reality again, and the bond between them, though still damaged, is not completely broken. This sets the stage for a deeper confrontation where understanding the truth behind the illusions becomes the only way forward. In this continuing arc of The Monkey King 2, the story enters one of its most unstable and emotionally charged phases. The White Bone Demon has already fractured trust, distorted reality, and pushed Monk Tang and Sun Wukong into psychological exhaustion. But now her strategy becomes even more dangerous. She is no longer just creating illusions. She is blending illusion with near-reality situations so perfectly that even experienced perception cannot easily separate truth from deception. Sun Wukong begins this stage with a very different mindset than before. The frustration and emotional reactions that once defined him are now replaced by controlled observation. He moves carefully through each situation, analyzing not just what he sees, but how it is constructed. He realizes that the illusions are becoming increasingly layered. Some are direct fabrications, while others are based on real memories twisted into false outcomes. This makes the enemy far more dangerous than simple illusion magic. It is psychological engineering, designed to rewrite how reality is interpreted. Monk Tang is now in a fragile emotional state. His faith still exists, but it is no longer absolute. He is constantly questioning whether his spiritual judgment is reliable. Every illusion he witnesses feels emotionally real, even when something inside him whispers that it might not be true. This internal conflict drains him continuously. He begins to rely more on hesitation than certainty, which creates delays in decision-making. In this environment, hesitation becomes another vulnerability the White Bone Demon quickly exploits. The White Bone Demon escalates her tactics further by introducing synchronized illusions, multiple scenarios occurring at the same time, forcing each character to witness different versions of reality. Sun Wukong sees situations where Monk Tang appears to reject him completely, while Monk Tang sees visions where Sun Wukong is acting independently and dangerously. These parallel illusions are designed to eliminate any shared understanding between them. If two people cannot agree on reality, then cooperation becomes impossible. Sun Wukong starts responding to this by focusing on emotional neutrality. Instead of reacting to what he sees, he begins testing consistency. He quietly repeats observations, compares environmental details, and tracks small inconsistencies in timing and reactions. He notices that real-world interactions have subtle unpredictability, while illusions tend to follow overly structured emotional patterns. This becomes one of his key insights. Illusion can mimic reality, but it cannot replicate natural randomness perfectly. Monk Tang, however, is still trapped in emotional interpretation. Every illusion feels like a moral test to him. If Sun Wukong appears dangerous, he questions whether compassion is still justified. If innocent people appear harmed, He questions whether their journey itself is causing destruction. This moral pressure slowly erodes his confidence as a spiritual guide. The white bone demon is not just attacking perception, she is attacking ethics, forcing him into impossible moral contradictions. At one point, the group faces a highly complex illusion sequence where reality seems to collapse entirely. The environment shifts rapidly, conversations overlap, and cause and effect logic breaks down. In this chaos, Monk Tang loses clarity completely for a moment, unable to distinguish direction or purpose. Sun Wukong steps in, not with force but with stability. He begins guiding Monk Tang through observation rather than belief, encouraging him to focus on inconsistencies rather than emotional impact. This is a subtle but important shift in their dynamic. Sun Wukong is now acting as a stabilizer instead of a suspect. The white bone demon reacts to this resistance by increasing emotional targeting. She begins generating illusions that are not just visual, but deeply personal. Scenes that reflect each character's fears and regrets. For Monk Tang, it is failure and loss of innocence. For Sun Wukong, it is his violent past and the belief that he can never change. These targeted illusions are designed to weaken identity itself, making each character question who they really are. Sun Wukong experiences a moment of internal struggle during this phase. For the first time, the illusions successfully trigger emotional memory instead of just perception confusion. He is forced to confront his past actions as a destroyer, and for a brief moment, doubt resurfaces. But instead of falling into despair, he uses that emotional pressure as clarity. He begins to understand that the enemy's strength lies in emotional amplification, turning memory into distortion. This realization strengthens his resolve instead of breaking it. Monk Kang, meanwhile, begins showing subtle signs of recovery. Even though he is still confused, he starts questioning the consistency of the illusions more actively. He notices that emotional intensity does not always match logical structure. This creates a gap between feeling and reason, which becomes his first step back toward clarity. It is not full trust in Sun Wukong, but it is also not complete belief in illusion anymore. He is now caught between both states, which is dangerous but also necessary for breaking manipulation. The white bone demon, sensing that her control is weakening slightly, pushes for one final escalation in this phase. She creates a scenario where Sun Wukong appears to directly abandon Monk Tang during a critical moment of danger. This illusion is designed to completely destroy remaining trust. For a brief moment, Monk Tang almost fully accepts it as truth, but this time something different happens. Hesitation appears instead of certainty. That hesitation becomes the crack that prevents total emotional collapse. By the end of this part, the balance of control begins to shift slightly. The white bone demon still dominates the environment, but her illusions are no longer fully absolute. Sun Wukong is actively analyzing and resisting the structure of deception, while Monk Tang is beginning to question the reliability of what he sees. The bond between them is still damaged, but not irreparable. Most importantly, illusion is no longer fully accepted as reality. It is being challenged. This marks a subtle but critical turning point where the path toward breaking free from manipulation finally begins to form. The white bone demon has pushed her psychological warfare to the extreme, but something important is changing. Her control is no longer absolute. The cracks Sun Wukong noticed earlier are now becoming visible in multiple situations, and Monk Tang is no longer fully convinced by what he sees. The battlefield is still dangerous, but for the first time resistance is forming inside the illusion system. Sun Wukong begins this stage with a much sharper sense of awareness. He is no longer trying to prove innocence or fight every illusion directly. Instead, he focuses on structure. He observes how illusions begin, how they shift, and how emotional triggers activate them. He realizes something important. The illusions are not random magic. They are responsive systems that adapt to emotional reaction. This means every strong emotional response actually strengthens the illusion. So he begins doing something different. He reduces reaction. He speaks less, observes more, and avoids engaging emotionally unless necessary. This creates instability in the illusion patterns because they rely on emotional feedback to stay strong. Monk Tang is also evolving slowly, although his process is more painful. He is still uncertain, but doubt is no longer one-sided. Earlier he believed illusions more than reality. Now he starts questioning both. This creates a dangerous mental space, but also an important one. It means he is no longer fully controlled. He begins noticing contradictions in what he sees. For example, timing inconsistencies, emotional exaggerations, and repeated patterns that should not naturally occur. These small observations begin building internal resistance against deception. The white bone demon responds by increasing intensity instead of precision. She starts layering multiple illusions at once, making environments unstable and constantly shifting. The goal is simple: overwhelm perception so completely that analysis becomes impossible. Entire scenes now change without warning. Conversations overlap, and physical space itself becomes unreliable. Even experienced perception struggles in this environment. But this time, something different happens. Sun Wukong does not break under pressure. Instead, he begins mapping instability. He notices that even in chaos, patterns still repeat. Illusions cycle through emotional themes: fear, betrayal, guilt, almost like a structured loop. This gives him a crucial realization. The enemy is powerful, but not limitless. It is operating within a system that can be understood. Once something has structure, it can be disrupted. This becomes his mental foundation moving forward. Monk Tang, meanwhile, is going through a quieter but deeper transformation. He is no longer reacting instantly to every illusion. Instead, he pauses, something he did not do earlier. This pause creates space between perception and belief. In that space, doubt grows, but so does awareness. He begins to understand that emotional intensity is not proof of truth. Just because something feels real does not mean it is real. This is a major philosophical shift for his character, because his entire spiritual path was built on trust in perception and compassion. Now he is learning that perception itself can be manipulated. The white-bone demon attempts to capitalize on this fragile state by creating one of her most complex illusion sequences yet. She constructs layered scenarios where Sun Wukong appears to act independently, Monk Tang appears to be betrayed, and the environment constantly shifts between safety and danger. The goal is complete cognitive collapse. Make reality so confusing that decision-making becomes impossible. For a moment, it almost works. Monk Tang is overwhelmed again, caught between conflicting signals. But this time, Sun Wukong steps in differently. Instead of reacting emotionally or physically, he starts guiding Monk Tang through observation. He does not tell him what is true or false. Instead, he points out inconsistencies, small details that do not align logically. This is a turning point in their dynamic. Earlier, trust was emotional. Now it is becoming analytical. Monk Tang begins to rely less on feeling and more on observation, even if only slightly. The white-bone demon reacts again, but something unexpected happens. Her control starts to fluctuate. The illusions are still strong, but they are no longer perfectly stable. Sun Wukong's reduced emotional reaction is weakening the system. Monk Tang's growing skepticism is also reducing its effectiveness. The illusion network is still active, but it is losing consistency. This creates small openings in the system, moments where reality briefly becomes visible beneath deception. Sun Wukong begins using these openings to track the origin point of the illusion energy. He realizes that the system is not spread evenly. It has a core structure, a central source that stabilizes everything. If that core is disrupted, the entire illusion network could collapse. This realization changes the direction of his thinking completely. Instead of surviving illusions, he is now planning how to break their foundations. Monk Tang, meanwhile, experiences one more emotional shift. He begins to see Sun Wukong not as a threat or certainty, but as uncertainty that is still consistent. Even though trust is not fully restored, complete rejection is no longer possible. This in-between state is dangerous but necessary. It means he is no longer under total illusion control. The white-bone demon has spent most of the journey breaking trust, bending perception, and separating Monk Tang and Sun Wukong emotionally. But now, the situation is no longer fully under her control. The resistance forming inside the group is starting to weaken her illusion network from within. Sun Wukong enters this stage with a completely evolved mindset. He is no longer focused on proving innocence, nor is he reacting emotionally to deception. Instead, he is treating every illusion as a system with rules. He studies repetition, timing, and emotional triggers in a more structured way. What he realizes now is crucial. Illusions are not infinite creativity. They are repeated psychological templates. Fear-based scenarios follow similar patterns. Betrayal-based illusions repeat emotional setups. Even the environment changes in predictable cycles. This realization gives him something he didn't have before: predictability inside chaos. Monk Tang is also changing, but his transformation is more fragile and internal. He is no longer fully trusting illusions, but he is also not fully trusting Sun Wukong. Instead, he exists in a constant state of questioning. This mental state is unstable, but it is also the first step toward clarity. He begins to focus more on details rather than emotional impact. When illusions appear, he no longer immediately reacts emotionally. Instead, he hesitates, analyzes, and observes inconsistencies. This hesitation is dangerous in combat situations, but essential for breaking psychological manipulation. The White-Bone Demon escalates her strategy again, realizing that emotional manipulation alone is no longer fully effective. She begins to compress multiple illusions into shorter time frames, forcing rapid decision-making. The goal is simple: overwhelm the mind so quickly that analysis becomes impossible. Entire sequences of events now shift within seconds. Friend becomes enemy, safety becomes danger, and reality resets without warning. This creates a mental environment where stability feels impossible to maintain. Sun Wukong, however, begins adapting to this instability. Instead of trying to process everything at once, he starts breaking illusions into fragments. He stops viewing situations as complete narratives and instead focuses on small segments of behavior. He tracks movement patterns, repetition loops, and environmental inconsistencies in micro-observations. This allows him to function even in high instability. While others are overwhelmed by the speed of illusion shifts, he begins to mentally slow it down by focusing only on structure, not emotion. Monk Tang experiences a critical turning point in this phase. During one illusion sequence, he notices something unusual. The emotional intensity of a scene does not match its logical structure. This creates a disconnect inside his perception. Instead of fully believing or fully rejecting what he sees, he starts separating emotion from observation. This is a major shift in his character development. For someone who has always relied on compassion and belief, learning to question emotional truth is extremely difficult. But it also gives him a small window of independence from manipulation. The White-Bone Demon begins to lose control over some sequences. Her illusions still function, but they are no longer perfectly synchronized. Small delays appear between cause and effect. Emotional triggers do not always produce expected reactions. This indicates that the system is destabilizing. Sun Wukong's analytical resistance and Monk Tang's growing skepticism are weakening the feedback loop that sustains the illusion structure. At one point, the group encounters a highly unstable environment where multiple illusion layers overlap. In this sequence, Sun Wukong begins actively mapping illusion structure in real time. He notices that each illusion has a reset pattern, a moment where the environment subtly reinitializes before shifting again. This becomes a breakthrough insight. It means the illusion system is not continuous, it is being refreshed in cycles. That creates a vulnerability window. Monk Tang also begins noticing partial repetition in scenarios. He sees similar emotional setups appearing in different forms. This reinforces his suspicion that what he is experiencing is not entirely real. Even though he is still emotionally affected, logic is now interfering with belief. This dual processing state, emotion versus observation, is unstable, but it is also the first step toward breaking psychological control. The White-Bone Demon reacts strongly to this growing resistance. She begins intensifying emotional distortion instead of structural complexity. The illusions become more personal, targeting memories, guilt, and fear more aggressively. The goal is to break internal resistance by forcing emotional overload. But instead of fully breaking them, this actually creates unintended effects. Sun Wukong becomes even more detached and analytical, while Monk Tang becomes more cautious and observant. Faith starts to feel tested. The Monkey King, however, becomes more alert and aggressive. His instincts tell him that something unnatural is controlling the environment around them. But the problem is that every time he tries to act, it seems to confirm the suspicion that he is the danger himself. This creates a painful contradiction. Protecting the group makes him look guilty, and staying passive makes him feel useless. The White-Bone Demon begins her next phase of manipulation. She disguises herself as innocent villagers, victims, and even people in distress, all carefully designed to trigger emotional responses. Each encounter is staged to make Sun Wukong appear violent or reckless. The group starts witnessing incidents where destruction follows the Monkey King's actions, but what they do not realize is that these are illusions crafted to frame him. The demon understands something very important. Physical strength means nothing if trust is destroyed. Slowly, Monk Tang begins to hesitate. His once unshakable faith in his disciple begins to weaken as the evidence around him appears undeniable. This emotional fracture becomes the heart of the story. Sun Wukong, who once stood above heaven and earth with pride, now finds himself in a position where his own identity is questioned. He is not just fighting enemies anymore, he is fighting perception. The film highlights this internal conflict beautifully. Instead of showing him as a perfect hero, it presents him as a broken warrior trying to prove that change is possible. But no matter what he does, the world refuses to see him beyond his past. This is where his character becomes deeply human, despite being a mythical being. At the same time, Monk Tang struggles with his own dilemma. His role as a spiritual guide demands compassion, forgiveness, and patience, but reality keeps challenging those beliefs. When faced with constant illusions that suggest Sun Wukong is harming innocent people, he is forced to question whether holding on to faith is truly wisdom or dangerous ignorance. This internal conflict makes him one of the most emotionally complex characters in the story. He is not fighting demons outside, he is fighting doubt within himself. As tension rises, the White-Bone Demon escalates her attacks further by creating situations where the Monkey King is forced into impossible choices. Either he acts and risks appearing guilty, or he hesitates and allows danger to unfold. This psychological trap is designed to isolate him completely from the group. The more he tries to defend himself, the more the situation turns against him. It becomes a cycle of misunderstanding that feels impossible to escape. Even the audience begins to question what is real and what is illusion, which is exactly what the demon intends. The film's visual storytelling becomes more intense during this phase. Environments shift unpredictably, skies darken suddenly, and characters appear and disappear without warning. The boundaries between reality and illusion are completely blurred. The Monkey King's frustration reaches its peak as he realizes that fighting physical enemies is far easier than fighting lies that people believe. His strength, once his greatest weapon, now feels meaningless in a world where truth itself is unstable. One of the most powerful emotional moments in this part comes when Sun Wukong is directly confronted by Monk Tang. The trust between them reaches its lowest point. Monk Tang, torn between belief and evidence, questions whether he made a mistake by choosing the Monkey King as his disciple. This moment is not about anger, it is about heartbreak. Sun Wukong, for the first time, cannot respond with confidence. Instead, he is forced to face the painful possibility that no matter how much he changes, his past will always define him in the eyes of others. The white bone demon watches this destruction of trust with satisfaction, as her true goal is not killing them but separating them emotionally, because once unity is broken, survival becomes impossible. The group begins to fall apart from within, and this marks the turning point of the story. The journey that once symbolized enlightenment is now becoming a test of endurance against manipulation and doubt. By the end of this section, everything is unstable. Trust is broken, truth is unclear, and even the strongest bond between master and disciple is hanging by a thread. Sun Wukong stands alone emotionally, questioning whether redemption is even possible in a world that refuses to forgive. Monk Tang, on the other hand, is trapped between his spiritual ideals and the harsh reality unfolding before him. This sets the stage for an even more intense continuation, where the final truth behind the white bone demon's illusions will begin to surface, forcing every character to confront what is real and what is not. The conflict inside the Monkey King, too, now enters its most dangerous stage, where truth and illusion. Part of the story is not about new enemies appearing. It is about existing bonds breaking under continuous pressure, where even small doubts turn into irreversible cracks. Sun Wukong is now fully aware that the battlefield is no longer physical. He has stopped reacting impulsively and instead focuses on observing the structure of the illusions. He realizes that every false scenario follows a pattern. Each one is designed to trigger a specific emotional weakness. Fear, guilt, and mistrust are being used like weapons. This understanding changes his approach completely. Instead of proving himself or defending his actions, he starts collecting information silently, trying to locate the source behind the illusions. His transformation from a reactive warrior into a strategic thinker becomes more visible in this stage. Monk Tang, however, is reaching his breaking point. The constant manipulation has made him emotionally exhausted. His faith in compassion and forgiveness is still present, but it is no longer stable. Every illusion he witnesses feels more real than the last one. The white bone demon continues to target his leadership by creating situations where his decisions appear to cause harm. This makes him question not only Sun Wukong, but also himself. He begins to wonder whether his spiritual path is strong enough to survive a world filled with deception. This internal struggle is what makes his character deeply human. He is not fighting monsters outside, but uncertainty inside his own belief system. The white bone demon escalates her strategy further by isolating members of the group emotionally. She creates illusions where each disciple appears to act independently, suggesting betrayal from within the group. This is designed to break the last remaining connection between them. If trust inside the group disappears completely, then survival becomes impossible. The demon does not need to defeat them in combat. She only needs to make them turn against each other. This phase of manipulation is the most dangerous so far because it targets unity itself. Sun Wukong begins to notice something crucial during this stage. The illusions are becoming more refined, but they are also leaving behind small inconsistencies. He starts paying attention to timing, repetition, and environmental details that do not align perfectly. These small cracks in the illusion system give him hope that the enemy, despite being powerful, is not flawless. This becomes his first real opportunity to fight back mentally. Instead of being trapped inside the illusion cycle, he starts identifying moments where reality briefly overlaps with deception. At one point in the journey, the group faces an illusion that pushes Monk Tang to the edge of collapse. He is shown a scenario where his teachings are responsible for destruction, and people he tried to save are suffering because of his choices. This illusion is particularly powerful because it attacks his identity as a spiritual guide. For a moment, he truly believes that his path may be wrong. This is the most vulnerable point for his character, where faith and doubt collide directly. Sun Wukong observes this moment carefully, realizing that the enemy is intentionally trying to destroy Monk Tang's confidence, so the entire group loses direction. Sun Wukong makes a quiet decision here, not to fight emotionally, but to protect stability. Instead of reacting to the illusion directly, he focuses on keeping Monk Tang grounded. He does not argue or force belief. Instead, he tries to maintain calm presence, allowing Monk Tang space to process what is real and what is not. This subtle shift shows that Sun Wukong is no longer just a fighter. He is becoming a stabilizing force for the group, even while being personally targeted by suspicion. The white bone demon, however, becomes more aggressive as she senses resistance. Her illusions now begin to overlap, making it harder to distinguish one scenario from another. Reality feels fragmented. The group experiences moments where time and space feel distorted, and even simple movements become. Now the journey of the Monkey King too reaches its final phase, where everything built on illusion, fear, and misunderstanding finally moves toward collapse. The white bone demon has spent the entire journey breaking trust between Monk Tang and Sun Wukong, manipulating perception and reshaping reality into something unstable. But at this point, her control is no longer absolute. The system she built is starting to fail under the pressure of awareness, observation, and emotional resistance. Sun Wukong enters this final stage with complete clarity about the nature of the enemy. He no longer sees the battlefield as physical or emotional alone. He sees it as a structured illusion system with weaknesses. Every illusion, no matter how complex, still follows patterns. He has now fully mapped these patterns in his mind. He understands that the enemy relies on emotional reaction loops. If there is no reaction, the illusion weakens. If there is analysis instead of fear, the structure becomes unstable. This is his final transformation, from a misunderstood warrior into a strategic force capable of breaking deception itself. Monk Tang also reaches a crucial turning point. He is no longer fully controlled by illusion, nor is he fully trusting Sun Wukong. Instead, he exists in a balanced state between doubt and understanding. This balance is dangerous but necessary. It allows him to question reality without completely losing faith. He begins to consciously observe situations instead of emotionally reacting to them. This shift allows him to recognize inconsistencies more clearly than before. Illusions still affect him, but they no longer fully define his decisions. The white bone demon realizes something important at this stage. Her illusion system is no longer producing the same level of control. The emotional triggers are becoming less effective. Sun Wukong is not reacting as expected, and Monk Tang is no longer fully believing what he sees. This is the first time her strategy begins to fail structurally. So she escalates to her final approach: total synchronization of illusion layers. She attempts to merge multiple deception streams into one overwhelming reality distortion, where nothing remains stable at all. This final illusion sequence becomes the most chaotic environment in the entire journey. Time, space, identity, and memory begin overlapping. The group experiences simultaneous versions of events, past, present, and false futures blending together. The goal is complete cognitive breakdown, where even analysis becomes impossible. For a brief moment it seems overwhelming even for Sun Wukong. The environment is designed to eliminate structure entirely. But this is where his final breakthrough occurs. Instead of trying to understand the entire illusion at once, he focuses only on the reset patterns he discovered earlier. He identifies the exact moment where illusion layers refresh. This becomes his entry point. Rather than fighting inside the illusion, he begins disrupting its timing. By breaking the synchronization pattern, he causes instability in the entire system. The illusion begins to stutter. Small errors appear in space, time, and repetition. Mongtang also plays an unexpected role in this stage. Instead of fully collapsing under confusion, he begins anchoring himself using observation rather than belief. He focuses on inconsistencies rather than emotional impact. This allows him to remain partially grounded even inside chaos. For the first time, he is not just a passive victim of illusion, he becomes someone who can resist it mentally. The white bone demon tries to regain control by intensifying emotional pressure, but it no longer works effectively. The emotional loops that once controlled perception are now breaking down due to lack of reaction. Sun Wukong's detachment and Monk Tang's cautious observation remove the fuel needed for illusion stability. This creates a cascading failure inside the system. As the illusion structure collapses, the true nature of the white bone demon's power begins to weaken. She is forced to rely less on deception and more on direct manifestation, which exposes her vulnerability. The battlefield shifts from psychological manipulation to direct confrontation. But now the advantage has changed. Sun Wukong is no longer fighting blind, and Monk Tang is no longer fully deceived. In the final moments of this phase, the illusion system reaches its breaking point. The layered distortions begin collapsing one by one, revealing fragments of real space beneath them. The emotional confusion that once controlled every decision is replaced by clarity. Sun Wukong finally sees the structure behind the entire manipulation clearly enough to act decisively. Monk Tang, though still shaken, is no longer fully uncertain about what is real. By the end of this final part, the foundation of deception has been broken. The white bone demon's control over perception is no longer stable, and the group is no longer fully trapped inside illusion. The journey that began with broken trust and manipulated reality now moves toward confrontation with truth itself. Sun Wukong stands fully aware of the system he is fighting. Monk Tang regains partial clarity in his faith, and the illusion that once dominated everything finally begins to collapse, setting the stage for final resolution beyond deception.